Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, we're going to slow stitch an amusing trees runner. Now I call it a runner because it's reminiscent of a table runner, and it has a bunch of wonky trees making a really colorful forest. I've also added some little gems, some little stars on the trees to make it a little whimsical and festive, because who doesn't love gold at the holidays? There are many ways you can do this, and I like to use Christmas fabric. This makes the trees a little festive and theme-based, but it's also very fun. You just cut your shapes. They don't even have to be perfect triangles. In fact, they're a little more charming when they're not perfect. They look wonky and whimsical and very fun. Now I use a ribbon as my basis. You don't have to use a ribbon, you can use fabric, and you can make these any size you want. I like to use ribbon though because the ends are already finished, and there is really some beautiful thick ribbon out there. So let's get started. So this amusing tree runner is kind of a fun project. It uses the really wide ribbon that you can get at Christmas time that I think is intended to go on the Christmas tree, or wrap really large gifts and make big bows. But for stitching, the wide ribbon is kind of interesting. It poses some challenges, but it's also really terrific as well. Here I layered two pieces of ribbon together, and the reason I chose the ribbon is because the edges are finished and it gives just a nice overall look. I layered two so that I could stitch onto one, make the piece larger, the finished size, and have that nice finished edge. And this would be really nice on a table or even on a tree looped around different spots. Now I'm going to show you how I do it. There are lots of variations. You don't have to use ribbon. You can use fabric just as easily, but I really like that finished edge. If you have wired ribbon, that's terrific. If you don't like wired ribbon, but you like the ribbon, it's easy enough to remove as well. So to get started, we'll need some fabric scraps. I chose Christmas themed fabric. This is the season after all. And I chose some embellishments. So I'll show you what I have here. So for the embellishments for the top of the tree, I just have some little beaded stars, some star buttons, and some just round red buttons. I thought the red was really festive, and it would be a nice little sparkle and shine for the tree. So I'll just set those aside for now, but I wanted to let you know what I was kind of thinking about. You can use anything on the trees that you want, or none of it at all. I have a bunch of Christmas fabric scrap pieces. These are pieces that are left over from other projects. They kind of coordinate somewhat. You know, most of the Christmas fabric has red and green colors on it. These tend to have a little more darker colors as well, and I'll make that work in my project. And then the big decision is the ribbon, and this is really where you start out with your project. So these rolls of ribbon come in all different thicknesses, and that will dictate the size of your finished piece, as well as the piece that you're working on. So a nice large 4-inch ribbon here would be a great piece. It would also be great for the background, the final piece, or you could stitch right onto it as well. And you can just double this up to get a finished background. That's what I'm going to do today in class. But you can just choose any of the ribbon that you want. The 4-inch ribbon is really terrific. I just love that size. But I'm not going to use that today. And then there's the 2.5-inch ribbon, and this ribbon is really wonderful. That's what I'm going to use today. There's also 2-inch ribbon, and this is about 1.5 inch. So really it depends on your color scheme, what you have, and what you want to use. Today I'm going to use this red and beige Christmas ribbon. It's from a few years ago. It is 2.5-inch ribbon, and I just love it. If I wanted to layer it with additional ribbon, well, either of these would work because they'd stick out from the edge. But I could also layer it with fabric if I wanted. Today though, I'm not going to layer it with fabric. I'm just going to layer it with an additional piece of ribbon just to cover my stitching work. And that's easy enough to do. So the first thing you want to do is take your ribbon that you're going to stitch your trees on and choose what size you want. Now this is wire edged ribbon, and I'm going to choose maybe a little longer than a foot. I'm just going to eyeball it. And even though I'm cutting through the wire here, which is really a cardinal sin for anyone who loves their scissors and shears, it's the end of the year and I'm going to have these sharpened, so I'll cut myself a little slack. Because this is going to be my finished ribbon, and I'm not going to stitch it onto additional larger ribbon, I'm going to make a second cut, and I want it just to be the same size as the first cut. So I'll cut it a little larger, and I can always trim it down afterwards. So this will be the piece that goes on the back that I stitch together just to have a finished edge. So whatever size ribbon you decide to make your little runner, just make 2 of them if you want the back to be a finished edge. I'm going to set aside that second piece right now because I don't need it. And now I'm going to take out the fabric that I selected, my pin cushion, and now I'm going to play around with creating the amusing shapes for the trees. Now I find this project to be really fun and the trees to be really whimsical, really wonky, and that's the look I'm going for. So I'm just going to go through my fabric, and what I like to do is choose a darker fabric for the trunk of the trees. So these are like my darker fabrics here and here. I think I'm going to use these for the tree trunks, so I'll set that aside for now. And now I just want to choose an assortment of colors that coordinate somewhat for those trees. Because I want them to be whimsical, I really want some variation in the color scheme. I really am going to go heavy with the reds and the greens, I think. And I don't even need that much fabric. Because this is an off-white, I think I'll veer away from the white fabric. And I'll keep these here. I can always go back to my others. So now that I know that my ribbon is about 2.5 inches, I want all my trees to fit within that 2.5 inches. I don't know how many trees I'll make just yet. I'll just cut a few pieces, and I like to cut 2 of each, even if I don't use them. This way my finished work coordinates. So I'm going to take this plaid, I happen to really love this, and I'll just cut 2 trees. This is a little taller than it should be, the finished size, but that's okay. And now I'm just going to make kind of a wonky tree, maybe tilt it over, kind of like the Grinch tree. And I'll just play around with the shape, and I'll do that with all of the trees. I'll vary the sizes a little so they're not all the same size. And continue this with all these colors and prints of fabric until I have an assortment of trees that I could then create my design work from. So here I have an assortment of different wonky tree shapes, and these are going to be perfect for my stitching. And now I just want to create some stems here. So I create the height of the stems, and then I just trim a bunch, different widths. Some will bellow out. Again, I'm trying to make this wonky. So now from here, I start my design process. I like to start just with the trees, and I just play around with where I want them to go and what colors I want to separate the other trees. Some trees can overlap. I think that's kind of an interesting effect. Some can be closer together. Maybe I'll put this one back here. And you can also take your fabric and cut multiple pieces and just stack it to make a very interesting shaped tree. So I'm kind of happy with the way that looks. I have some extra trees here I can add in. I do like to make those little notched ends, so I'll just pull these trees in together a little further. And this is part of the design work that's so interesting and fun. So I'm happy with that. So now's the time for me to take my cell phone out and snap a photo so that I have the exact design saved that I really like. Alternatively, if you don't want to do that, you can just move your pieces up, just keeping them in position in the order that you like them. I have my trunks here, and I'll use that in a moment, but right now I want to make that notch. So I'm going to fold the edges together, and then I fold them in half. And then I don't really even need a deep notch. I just come out right to the end here. So that is how I'm going to start my piece. Now I'll just count my trees and make sure I have the same number of trunks. So I have 10 trees, so I just need to have 10 trunks. And then I can figure out how I want to put them as I go. I'm going to start in the center and build my way out. And some of these I'll have to trim down because I already can see that the trees themselves are a little shorter or not as wide. So I'll set those down and then put my trees right on top of them. And it's already starting to come alive. I'm really pleased with the way this is looking. So I'll continue to just place my pieces back on my ribbon, and then I'll pin them down, and then we can start sewing. So I have my little forest of trees here all pinned down. I'm going to just take my dark thread and stitch around the base, just enough stitches to hold the trunks in place. And then I'll come back with my greens and my reds and stitch my trees down. After that's all stitched down, we'll come back and embellish it with all our little buttons and beads. So I'll get started stitching. So now I've stitched all the trees, and I just used 3 colors. I used either black, green, or this burgundy, and I stitched them down, and my little runner is coming along. The trees are amusing, they're fun shaped, similar colors, they've got the different aspects to that, and I really like the way that's looking. So now it's ready to embellish. So I have some of embellishments here, and I can just play around and decide if I want to put these on or not. I think it's a cute touch, and so I'll play around and see where I want them to go. Some trees might not get them, some trees will. I'll stitch them on and then show you the finished result. So now I've stitched not only the trees, but I decided just to use matching stars for the top of all the trees. It's kind of simple, and I really like the way that looks. Plus the gold is just another element. It kind of contrasts nicely with the rustic ribbon. So you can leave it just like this. Here's the back. You can see all my threads. I just snip off any of the ones that are sticking out. But I like to finish it off. So I take that second piece of ribbon that we cut, and I'll just line it up right on top. And I'll just line up the trees right on top of that ribbon. I want to make sure it's nice and straight. And then I'll just pin it in place. Just in a couple of spots here and there. And then I'll just take some ribbon, and I like to stitch right around the edge here. Now you can do another buttonhole stitch, you can stitch a straight stitch, it's up to you. I just start inside the ribbon so that my knot is hidden, tuck that in, and then I'll just stitch around. So I think I'll just do a simple buttonhole stitch. I want to make sure my ribbon is lined up nicely. I come through and then just make another stitch, again come through that little loop that I leave at the end, and I'll continue doing this the length of the ribbon on both sides. So I stitched both sides of the border around, and as you can see, the back of my piece is nicely finished. So now all I want to do is match up the sides and cut those little notches. And I'll do it on this side. And there I have an amusing tree border. The trees are wonky, they're just fun shapes cut out of fabric that I really treasure for Christmas. I added it to a beautiful thick ribbon, and now I have something I can use as a decor piece on my table or counters. It's just something really simple and sweet. So that's how I make my amusing trees runner. I really like to have it around the house. I tuck it in my little decor. I made a little forest of little wooden trees that I picked up and some that I made and that I found along the way. I just tucked it in and it fits in perfectly. This would look great on a Christmas tree as well. You can always put it on a gift or on a Christmas table. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.